staff up there. I mean, it's not like you're going to see a ranger at every corner, but, you know, if you're up there for a few days, you're going to see a ranger if you have any issues or problems that they can help you with. And so you should...
I should have an adventure.
You should have an adventure. Everybody has an adventure that goes to the Allagash.
This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. We're heading up to the headwaters of the Allagash today. This is going to be a three-part adventure. We'll be on Chamberlain Lake searching for some of the historical features that have been sitting in the woods ever since the era of river-driving logs began. Second, we'll be visiting Nugent's Camps on Chamberlain, famous for its fishing and food and accommodations for going on 80 years. And third, well, we'll start the show with that third adventure, because I'll be doing this in a way that almost nobody else does or would. In fact, I was visited by a ranger while out on the lake, and he hadn't seen anything like this in the Allagash before. But maybe this is the best part. I could have just visited the lake and stumbled around until I found something, but if I want to do this like an expert, I should talk to an expert. So I went right to the top and checked in with Allagash Superintendent Matt LaRoche to find out exactly what I should be looking for. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Bar Harbor Whale Watch, Napa Auto Parts, and EBS. Well, Matt LaRoche, welcome to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. I think this is your third time on the show.
Well, maybe it is. Time flies, I guess, but I have been on before. I did know that.
Yep, you've been on before. We did an interview once, and then saw you up at the Churchill Dam thing last summer, and we had a nice chat there.
That was a great time, wasn't it?
Oh, we got good weather and everything except for the brief storm. Mm-hmm. And I had the misfortune when they did the helicopter demonstrations. I was directly underneath where they dropped the water. That was different.
Those Maine Forest Service pilots know who to shoot for.
I knew they were looking for me. They had to be. Well, Matt, I want to go up to Chamberlain Lake. I told you, I think, the last time we talked, that I spent my honeymoon up there 39 years ago. And I haven't really been back on the lake since. So I feel like way overdue to go back. And this time I want to do it right. My first time I had other things in my mind.
I bet you did.
This time I'm interested in seeing what I missed at the lake. So I am going to experiment with this. I actually bought an inflatable so I can putt around the lake and see more than I could last time. So I want to do this right, and I want you to explain to me exactly what I should go look for.
Okay. So basically you're going to come up the Golden Road and Telos Road and go up to Chamberlain Bridge, we have a ranger station right there at the thoroughfare between Chamberlain and Telos Lakes.
Yep. In fact, that's one of the reasons I bought the inflatable is I don't have to worry about trailer tires in that road. Now right. I only risked 4 tires instead of 6.
Right. It can be a little treacherous right after they grade it, but it's pretty nice going right now. We just came down from there the other day.
Okay.
And right at the Chamberlain Bridge Ranger Station, we got a nice boat launch and outhouses, a place to eat lunch right there, and there's a parking lot to leave your vehicle, and you can put in there and go up the lake. We do have a few watercraft restrictions on Chamberlain and Telos Lakes, not like the rest of the waterway, but basically you can't have any jet skis, hovercraft, airboats, racing boats, or pontoon boats. But your inflatable is allowed on Chamberlain and Telos Lake, and so you can go up with that and put in there at the bridge. And I could take you down through to explain some of the things on the lake if you'd like.
Yeah, I would very much like that. Let's start right there at the landing. First of all, are there any of those buildings I should look at and say, hey, that's historic?
Not at the bridge. There's just a ranger station there and our maintenance shop, and right there at the bridge is actually the parking lot is where a lumber camp used to be, which Levesque's camp used to be there. But other than that, that's all there really is at the bridge.
Well, let's not skip by those 2 good pit toilets back there.
Right. So if you go on if you drive on the bridge and look to the south, you're going to see Mount Katahdin and that whole range of mountains in Baxter State Park. It's really quite when you can see them on a nice clear day. It's quite a view from right on the bridge, and you could put in there at the boat launch.
Okay, with that much intel, let's skip ahead. I'm now standing in the boat launch on Chamberlain Bridge. This is the odd part of the story. 2 years ago, I flattened 3 tires in the Telos Road during the course of the summer. Last year, I managed to flatten 2. I flattened a couple of tires this year. I've always wanted to motor around some of Maine's more remote lakes, but I didn't want to trailer a boat. And I was concerned that any boat small enough to car top might be a problem if a big wind came up, especially in a lake the size of Chamberlain. Thus began the great experiment. I bought an inflatable. You might call it a Zodiac, but this one's actually a 9-foot 4-inch boat from Achilles. Most of the time, you'd use a boat like this to get back and forth to your yacht anchored in the harbor. But when it's deflated, I can throw it in the back of the Subaru Forester, along with the new Tohatsu 6-horsepower motor I bought at McKay's RV and Marine. An inflatable is just about impossible to swamp because it floats like a cork even when it's full of water. On the other hand, there's not much freeboard, so I get splashed a lot. I've used this boat a couple of times, but this is the first test in a big lake. It does take me about a half an hour to set it up and about 15 minutes to take it down, which isn't a whole lot more time than launching an aluminum boat from a trailer, but it is a little more work.
And let's go down towards Telecast Lake and Telecast Dam, and Telecast Dam is really it's one of the few remaining what we call timber crib dams left in the state. And when I first went up in that country, went to work, there was those timber crib dams were at Cocajo, Harrington Lake. They were all over the place, and they've all either been let go into disrepair or been replaced with concrete and steel dams. Mm-hmm. So that's quite a really there's only a couple that I know of in the state left, and Telecast is in pretty good shape. And that was first built in 1841. And that kind of worked in conjunction with Lock Dam, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. There was a bloodless war there at Telecast Dam at one time over the toll that the lumber barons were charging each other to sluice logs down through Telecast Dam, and but there was quite a disagreement over the toll rate for the logs, and actually the Maine legislature stepped in and set the fee to stop the disagreement over that. And
sounds like a bill John Martin would have put in.
Well, he wasn't alive back then, but he probably would have had he been alive.
So that bridge, that dam, rather, had quite a history in that I guess they had to replace it 2 or 3 times.
Oh, I don't know how many times it's been replaced, but I know when I first went to work there in the mid-'70s, it's been replaced once, and since then it was replaced in 1983 with pressure-treated 10x10, so it's going to last quite a bit longer. I'd say probably about 20 more years is left in that dam. We are going to be doing some maintenance on it this fall, and it does require some maintenance, but it's essentially in good shape. Actually, I want to mention one campsite on Telecast Lake, and I was reading an old Bangor and Rooster Railroad used to put out magazines to attract tourists to the area. This is way back around the turn of the century, and they talked about this campsite on High Bank on Telecast Lake being the nicest campsite on their whole trip. And they came from Moosehead Lake down the East Branch of the Penobscot down to Matagamon and back all the way down the Penobscot, and they said that was the nicest campsite that they came on their whole trip. And it is a nice site. It's kind of tucked in out of the waves, and it's got that view of Catardon, and it's a nice sandy beach there and stuff. So I just want to put in a plug. If you want to go up there and just camp at a site, High Bank Campsite on Telecast Lake is pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, but now everybody knows about it, and I'll have to wait in line.
Well, there's 2 sites there. We're not, especially Telecast. Most people put in at the bridge and head north down the Allagash. Not too many head south down towards Telecast, so it really doesn't get used that much.
And what happened? Just like Matt LaRoche said, I launched at Chamberlain Bridge and headed north. As I was launching, a couple were loading up their canoe to the gunnels with camping gear, and they were heading to a High Bank campsite. I figured I'd leave Telecast for my trip out, but it rained and I was low on gas, so I never did make it this time. If you've just tuned in, here's what's happening. I got the lowdown from Allagash Superintendent Matt LaRoche about how to visit Chamberlain Lake and find its secrets. I have now launched my 9-foot inflatable boat at Chamberlain Bridge, and I'll be staying overnight 2 nights at Nugent's Camps. I'm heading up lake now. Stand by. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. It's a real adventure on today's show. We are on Chamberlain Lake, the big lake that drains into the Allagash River. I put in at Chamberlain Bridge, just as Allagash Superintendent Matt LaRoche said I should do, with my 9-foot inflatable boat and 6-horsepower engine. Round Pond and Telecast Lake are to the right, but I'm turning left and doing what Matt said.
If you head north from what's like most people do, from the boat launch at Chamberlain Lake, it's a 16-mile lake up Chamberlain. It can come up really rough. So that's one thing to be mindful of, and we always tell people to travel up the west shore because the prevailing wind is out of the northwest, and if you travel up the west shore, you'll pretty much stay out of the wind as you go up the lake.
My recollection is from my honeymoon, and granted this was 39 years ago, we had to paddle against the wind to get to our campsite on the west side and hated every minute of it. But then we just floated back.
Right, that's right. So a lot of crews put in at Allagash Lake, which is the real headwaters of the whole Allagash waterway, and come down Chamberlain Lake to take advantage of that prevailing wind. And but anyway, Nugent's Camps is on the opposite shore. It's on the east shore. So if you want to go to Nugent's Camps, you probably will be exposed to the wind. But some days it's not a factor. But we try to encourage people to stay on the west shore, and that's where all the campsites are anyway. Mm-hmm. And Nugent's Camps is about 5 miles up the lake, and you can get overnight accommodations there in traditional log cabins, and they're a really nice set of camps that the state owns them and leases them out to the operators there to run as traditional sporting camps.
And those have been there forever.
Well, not forever, but Nuge and Patty, I can't remember when they went up, established those cabins, but it was in the 30s, I believe, right there. In the 1930s, he went up and built them one cabin at a time with cedar shakes right out of the woods and logs, and they made wooden sinks and everything in those places.
Nugent's. I'm outside the dining area right now, which goes unused, except during the busier periods of the year. Really nicely appointed kitchen in there, the kind you'd find in any snowmobile club. Lots of utility space back there, and then a nice main dining room with 2 main tables that everybody can line up and grub down. Cabins themselves range from cabins that are cozy enough for 2 people to cabins big enough to whole families and even family reunions. Picnic tables outside. There's a brook that comes down here, which has created a small inlet. The dock goes out from there, so in the small inlet, you're somewhat sheltered from most of the prevailing breezes. And so everyone comes in there and docks and unloads pretty easily. And they're there to bring your luggage back up in an ATV, a side-by-side. And as with any sporting camp famous for its fishing, there's lots of boats here just waiting to be used. There's some Smoker Craft aluminum boats that are equipped with 9.9 horsepower Hondas. There's a bigger one over there with 40 horse. And then some lined up in the shoreline in case they need even more fishing capacity. Most folks are going to bring their own because you can launch over there at Chamberlain Bridge. And along the dock there's plenty of space to tie up multiple boats. Kayaks down here in the shoreline, along with the canoes. I'm in Ledbetter Pond Camp. Big log cabin with 2 bedrooms, a big living space, big sofas. How they ever got these chairs in here, I'll never know. Nice sofa, huge wood stove, so this place is going to be really toasty if you need to heat it up in winter. But the gas lights in here will almost heat this place up. Certainly in any cool summer day, the place will get warm in the morning with these gas lights. Speaking of which, there's gas lights all over the place right here in the living room. There's 1, 2 over the kitchen table, 1 over the stove, 1 by the refrigerator, 1 by the reading couch, 1 as you enter towards the bedrooms. So there's 6 gas lights just in the main living room. There's 1 in the pseudo bathroom, and there's 1 each in the bedrooms. The bedrooms have double beds in this particular cabin and 2 bunk beds, 1 in each room. So you can sleep 8 people in here if you were really comfortable. By the stove we have cast iron cookware as well as Teflon non-stick. Lots of pots and pans down below the sink. Plenty of silverware, not just glasses but wine glasses. They anticipated my needs. Lots of plates.
Moving on up, they're going to come to a place called Mud Pond Carry, which comes in on the west shore, and that's a traditional Native American route from the Penobscot Drainage, the West Branch, over to the Allagash, and that's been a carry for centuries. And the portage route is still in use today. In fact, we have a lot of those camp groups with youth camps coming across there from the West Branch and going either down the east branch of the Penobscot or on up the Allagash using that same route today.
How far is the portage?
It's 1.5 miles.
Okay.
And it's not a very nice portage. If you ever read any of Thoreau's books, because that is not under state control, it's private, and it's still. If you ever when Thoreau came across there with Indian guide, he got separated from his guide and got lost on that portage.
Oh, jeez.
And 2 nights ago, we had a youth in one of those cabins got separated from his group and spent the night in the woods by himself. He was found in the morning by one of the game wardens that came in on the search. But that it's not a really great portage route, but it is still in use, and it's the traditional route. It's the shortest route to get from West Branch to the Allagash. Yeah, I wouldn't do it if I didn't have to.
Yeah.
The Northern Forest Canoe Trail, if you ever heard of that, that
I do.
enters the waterway at Mud Pond Carry. That's where that comes across.
I'm looking into Mud Pond from the west shore of Chamberlain Lake. It looks shallow, and I've got a brand new outboard without a scratch on the propeller. I'm chicken. I'm not going in there.
And directly across from Mud Pond Carry is what they call Chamberlin Farm. You can kind of still tell today that there was a bunch of cleared land there. At one time, it was like 350 acres plus of cleared land there, and they were raising oats and hay for the horses of the day. That was the main. That was the main haul mechanism to get the wood down from the down to the lakes and streams.
Mm-hmm. What's it look like now? Can you tell it was somewhat cleared, or is it still partly cleared, or what?
Well, there's one building that's still left there, and it's one of the Nugent's camp's outpost cabins. Mm-hmm. And you can tell it because the growth is different. It's not a bunch of spruce and fir. It's a lot of popple and other species growing up in there. So you could tell it was cleared land, if to my eye, but some people probably wouldn't know because it is pretty well grown up now. There's some implements around there. There's actually one of the boats that used to haul the booms of logs down the lake was scuttled right there, and the remnants of that are still sitting right on the shore, right in front of the farm. Huh. And so there's, as you go over there, you'll see the building, and you could tell it was cleared land, but that's about all. And that the remnants of that boat are there. Now, when Thoreau made his visit, when he took the stage to Greenville and went up Moosehead Lake, down the Penobscot, across Mud Pond Carry, they resupplied it. Chamberlain Farm. They were able to buy some sugar there, and I think some potatoes and eggs and a few things like that. So that was at that time, that was a pretty major outpost, was Chamberlain Farm, where people could get their resupply. And like I said, they pastured the horses for the summer because they didn't use them. They didn't use them in the summer, and a lot of them ended up right there.
I'm now on the east shore of Chamberlain Lake. This inflatable boat with a 6-horsepower engine can get up to about 14 miles per hour with one person in it, but it's best for putting around at about 6 miles per hour. I am passing Nugent's cabin here at the Chamberlin Farm location. I do see some ancient rusting equipment on one part of the shore, and I guess I see a slight difference in the tree growth back behind the point. But I'll be honest, if Matt didn't say this was the location for the famous Chamberlain Farm, I would have no idea there was anything different about this spot. I can't see much from the water. I do have a map, and there's the cabin, so this is the place. But the forest is swallowing up this piece of history. So I'll head down the north end of the lake where history is still winning. Somewhere in those woods, there were 2 huge steam locomotives left among the trees. That's the next stop when Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine continues on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. Saturday mornings at 9, Sunday mornings at 8 on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. It's a most unusual show today. I'm up on Chamberlain Lake, headwaters of the Allagash Wilderness Waterway. I'm in a tiny 9-foot inflatable boat with a 6-horsepower 4-cycle engine. This is a great day for this trip with virtually no wind out here in the lake. Now, before I got up here, I did take the liberty of calling Matt LaRoche. He's superintendent of the Allagash, and I figured he'd be able to tell me what to look for and where to find it. And Matt, I know there's supposed to be some historic landmarks up there, but I really don't know much about it.
You know nothing. That's they call it the Tramway Historic District, and it's a National Historic Site, and it houses 2 there happens to be two log-moving apparatuses there. One of them is the Tramway, which is really, for the time it was built, was an engineering marvel, and it's unique. There's no other tramway log-moving device anywhere that any of us know about in the country or the world. So basically, it was there's 3,000 feet that separate two drainages there. The Chamberlain Lake, which would flow south because they built Lock Dam at the natural outlet, stopped the water, forced it down through Telos Dam. That's a big story, but I'm not going to go all into that. But there was quite a lot of work done at Lock Dam to reverse the flow of the water, and they would. So they built this tramway. Actually, Lock Dam was called. I'm going to back up a little bit. It's called Lock Dam because it had a set of locks in it. They could float logs in, raise the level of the water, and let them go out into Chamberlain Lake and drive them down the east branch of the Penobscot. But that was kind of a slow process, so they built this tramway in 1902. And all the hardware for it came from up by railroad to Greenville Junction, up Moosehead Lake, down the west branch of the Penobscot, across the head end of Chamberlain Lake, over to, it was quite a arduous task just to get the stuff in there.
Well, you could take a good part of the year to do it because most of the logging activity was happening in the winter.
Right. Well, all that stuff got brought in there in the wintertime. They brought it up Moosehead Lake by steamboat to Northeast Carry, and from there they brought it all across with sleds with horses over a frozen trail, road, whatever you want to call it, and brought them in there and set them all up. And anyway, it's 3,000 feet. It's on a little mini railroad track with, like, we call them trucks that held the logs, and they would pull the logs onto the tramway when it went into the end of Eagle Lake, and then they would carry them slowly across that 3,000 feet and dump them into Chamberlain Lake. It was just continuous 3,000 feet, it had a 6,000-foot cable, and it just kept going round and round and round with a steam power. And we've done quite a bit, mostly by volunteers, to get that like a static display so people can see the steam pipes are all rehooked and the gears are all remeshed and the belt is on it. And so, it was pretty interesting that when I first came back to the waterway in 2009, all the parts are just laying on the ground right there. It's like everything is here. It's just kind of falling apart. Mm-hmm. So we, like I said, with the help of volunteers, have done a lot of work at the tramway to recreate that so people can visualize it a little better when they're there.
And most of the access is really only by water, I take it.
Well, there is a bootleg trail in there. And it's just not illegal because we allow people to bushwhack in there however they want. Enough people have gone in there, so they've kind of created a trail from the road network out behind. But basically, the easiest and best way to get there is by either canoe or boat. Mm-hmm. And Tramway Cove on Chamberlain Lake is pretty shallow. I think you'll be able to make it with your small inflatable boat. But if you have a big boat, you can only get in there at the spring of the year when the water's high. When the water goes down, it's pretty hard to get into that cove with anything other than a canoe or a really small boat. So. Yeah,
okay. Like, what, 1 foot of water or less than that?
A couple feet, and when you get way in, almost ashore, it's going to go to 1 foot or even 6 inches, and it's kind of muddy there. So you want to wear your rubber boots when you get out.
Okay. I'm on the north end of Chamberlain Lake. I'm no good at estimating this, but it looks like the water level has come down 3 feet during the season as they continue to draw down. They do the drawdown to promote fish because nice shallow sandy areas is where they spawn. So when you draw down the lake, you produce more of that, and that helps. So it's not that they're necessarily using the water for a whole lot. It's just good fish preservation. So I'm on the north end of the lake. This is now all mudflat, where there isn't rocks, which is mostly rocks. But wherever there isn't rocks, there's moose prints. Big ones. Hunting season coming right up. This would be a heck of a place. All you'd have to be able to do is get the moose out. Good luck with that. There's some berry-laden poop in the beach. That's bear. And I can't make out what these footprints are. Maybe they're raccoon, I don't know. They're like really big toes, really spread out. My first thought was otter, but honestly, I don't know what otter footprints look like. So I'm going to call them raccoon until I look them up. So I've come to the north end, and as the superintendent said, there's a well-worn path down here somewhere that leads over a canoe portage to where the trains are. But I've misestimated. Apparently that path is on the other side of this channel. So I'm down on this north end beach, which is extensive, and I've been walking it for a little while, but I think where I need to go is over across the water over there. Bummer. Holy moly, look at the size of those. If I see that moose coming my way, I'm going to give him some room. Wow. Those are really fresh too. That moose was down on this mud flat today. And maybe not that long ago. It took 2 tries to find my way in. The tramway and trains are at the far end of this cove, but it's been a dry summer, and I knew that I was in trouble when I saw a flock of Canada geese standing upright in the middle of the cove. There are only a few inches of water in some spots. So eventually I worked my way to the bank and then trudged through mud all the way down the cove and across a small stream before I finally arrived at the trail. And wouldn't you know it? Just as I get there, a bunch of College of the Atlantic students are coming out. They've been having a pre-semester canoe trip, and they are just now portaging over from Eagle Lake to Chamberlain. It's a short trail, which is exactly why they put a tramway and trains in this spot almost a century ago. North end of the lake, where the tramway used to be, the trains are in the woods about 15 minutes ahead on this path. Getting in here was just as muddy as Matt predicted. But here we are at the beginning of the trail, and I'm being driven crazy by a black-backed woodpecker, one of those rare northern woodpeckers you don't see south of Bangor. Got 1, maybe 2 calling like crazy in this spot, and it's one of my favorite birds. And there's an old boiler in the woods right there. Wow, wow, wow. So there used to be a tramway here. I'm sure it was stream driven because there are 2 big boilers here with conveyor belts and with gears and sprockets and all that stuff. You can see the remnants of where the tramway used to be. In fact, there's a replica, sort of, well, not rebuilt, but at least preserved right here. And that's just after you step off the lake and into the woods. Let's go take a look. Continuing to walk up the path, tramway is still right here in the woods. Hasn't moved since they discontinued over 100 years ago. You would have thought that it had rusted out more. Most of the wood is pretty much rotten, but the iron is, well, it was always pretty strong to begin with, so it'll take a while to rust, but that's pretty impressive that it's still in shape that looks not so bad. Another impressive thing about this tramway is that they had to provide a fairly level pathway. And of course, you know the Maine woods, there's nothing level. So somebody 100 years ago had to build this little berm so that it's even and flat through bumpy patches in the woods, and that had to be done all by hand. So somebody had to dig all this up in Maine rocky soil, pile it up like that. Another testament to how old this is, there's a birch tree growing up right from the middle of it that is 14 to 16 inches through diameter. Some of these trees are even bigger than that. Here comes a hemlock that is growing up right through the middle of it. And that's a good 18 inches. So walking down the path towards Eagle Lake. You know, you could do this in the spring, have higher water, get a little closer, not have to walk the shoreline to get in here, but you'd be carried away by black flies. Meanwhile, I've just gotten my first mosquito bite, and so it's almost bug-free when it's dry up here late in the summer season in the fall. If you've just tuned in, I'm in the woods at the north end of Chamberlain Lake, headwaters of the Allagash. I'm taking the advice of Allagash Superintendent Matt LaRoche and visiting all the history that was left in the woods up here. We'll take a break while I walk another few hundred yards to where there are supposed to be 2 huge locomotive steam engines just left in the woods. It's an iconic sight that I've never seen, but I'm about to, and I'm taking you with me. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket with Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. It's a most unusual show today. We're on Chamberlain Lake on the Allagash looking for history. First, I talked with Allagash Superintendent Matt LaRoche to learn about what's up here and how to find it. Now, I'm actually up here looking. Before the break, I walked the trail where a tramway still lies in the Maine woods, a century after it was built there. I've now walked most of the way to where the locomotives are, so let's go back to Matt and get the whole story.
On the other end of the tramway sits 200-ton locomotives just sitting on almost within sight of Eagle Lake. And that's a whole different story. Those were brought in there in 1926 to move pulpwood. See, the tramway moved long logs, 16-foot logs, to the sawmills in Bangor. The trains hauled pulpwood across from Eagle Lake all over a 13-mile railroad over to Duchesne Lake and dumped them in there, and from there they were floated down the west branch of the Penobscot to the mills in Millinocket. So they were put in to bring 4-foot pulpwood to Millinocket because they could cut. At that time they had Lombard log haulers. They were cutting trees and 4-foot pulpwood all the way 10 miles from Churchill Dam and hauling them by Lombard log haulers to Churchill Dam, for instance, and piling them up on the lake. And then when the ice went out, they'd float them down to the tramway, load them onto those trains, and bring them down to over to Umbazooskis and float them down to the Millinocket mills.
How long did those trains operate? How many years?
I knew you were going to answer that question. Off the top of my head, I think 1926 till the Depression, 1933. So that's 13 years, right? Mm-hmm. So it was a 13-mile railroad, 13 years, and basically the Depression put it out of business. The demand for paper went down, and nothing was worth hauling out of there, so they just shut it all down and walked away from the whole place.
And left the trains right there.
Left the trains right there.
Wow.
King LaCroix, that's who built the railroad. He had the contract from Great Northern. He went to New York City, bought these 2 trains, and brought them by rail all the way to Lac Frontier, Quebec, which is just about 60 miles due west of Churchill Dam. And then they brought them in. They took them apart and brought them into the tramway with Lombard log haulers during the winter, and reassembled them at the tramway along with I think 60 cars, railroad cars that they built to put the pulpwood in, and conveyors, and they built a 1,500-foot trestle across the upper end of Chamberlain Lake, where Allagash Stream comes into Chamberlain Lake. So it's quite and the remnants of that are still visible today. Mm-hmm. In fact, from the trestle north, don't go underneath that trestle with your inflatable. It's canoes only with no motors all the way to Allagash Lake.
So I made it. I'm at the locomotives. They're bigger than you would imagine. They really are huge. And they serve such a short period of history, they became obsolete, steam-driven, when diesel was just starting to appear. So there's 2 trains and a couple of tracks. I have to assume that you sort of went one way then the other, because you couldn't exactly pass each other. So this is just a guess. We're next to the locomotives, but right here is just a wasteland of parts. A lot of the carts and stuff have just been left right here where the tracks were and left to rust. So they've been here about 100 years and they look like it. One of the wheels back there said it was made in 1911. It's just incredible to think that these trains did so much work for such a short period of time and then were just left here for history. It's also strange that although the century, 80 years old or more, closer to 90 years, sitting here in the woods, they've rusted, but not that much. You wouldn't want to try to restore one, but it's amazing what shape they're actually in. It's a piece of history you can walk right up to if you don't mind a long paddle or walk through the woods. The Eagle Lake and West Branch Railroad. During the winter of 1926 to 27, Edouard King LaCroix, using Lombard tractors, hauled all the materials from Lac Frontier, Quebec, to the shore of Eagle Lake, used to build the Eagle Lake and West Branch Railroad. LaCroix sold his operation to Great Northern Paper Company before its first trip on June 1st, 1927. Pulpwood was loaded into the 12-cord log cars by 2 conveyors. The floor of each log car was tilted 6 inches, as were the tracks at the terminal end, which extended 600 feet into Umbazookskus Lake. The pulpwood was dumped into the lake by pulling a pin that released the hinged sides of the log cars. In an average week, the Eagle Lake and West Branch Railroad hauled more than 6,500 cords of wood. Smaller Plymouth locomotives unloaded the cars at Duchesne Lake, then loaded the cars at the Eagle Lake end. This allowed the locomotives to refuel and take on water. When the railroad operation ended in 1933, the locomotives were obsolete and not worth transporting for reuse elsewhere. Remains of the 1,500-foot trestle, which crossed the northwest arm of Chamberlain Lake, is still an impressive sight. And that's the next stop. It takes a long time to slog my way back through the mud, but it is faster coming out because I now have a better idea of where not to step. After a while, I'm back in the boat, but the trestle is about 2 miles away, and the last mile looks so shallow that I'm just going to cut the engine and look from a distance. You know, I've seen pictures of this, and I've seen movies and YouTube videos, and it's gotten rattier. I think it's falling apart. A little bit of history is falling back into the lake. Trestle is there. It's kind of an interesting artifact. There's 5 pilings in the middle. You can see where the train tracks went across, but when you get halfway across, into the water and gone. And really, from both sides, I can't see where it ever went into the woods because I assume that's all grown up. Now then, I've been warned not to go past that trestle. Even though I'm just motoring along at 3 miles per hour with a 6-horsepower outboard on the back of a 9-foot inflatable dinghy, there are rules in the Allagash. In a moment, we'll tell you what boats can go where and what boats can go nowhere. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Welcome back to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. You and I are on Chamberlain Lake. Just up the lake from me now is Lock Dam, where the lake spills into the Allagash River. We'll be there in a moment, but first, I contacted Allagash Superintendent Matt LaRoche before my visit up here and had him explain everything I should look for during my visit. There's a lot of history in these woods. This is a special place. You can't exactly call it wilderness. It's a working forest all around it, but it feels like wilderness, and there are rules to keep it that way. So let's go to Matt.
Yeah, well, like I said, Chamberlain Lake really doesn't have much. There's no horsepower restrictions, but, basically you can't have pontoon boats or racing boats. You can't water ski and a few things like that. But from Lock Dam north all the way to Allagash Village is canoes only with 10 horsepower or less. And from Allagash Stream and Allagash Lake is canoes only with no motors at all. So those are really our quiet waters up in there. So, we got rangers on, and there's staff up there. I mean, it's not like you're going to see a ranger at every corner, but if you're up there for a few days, you're going to see a ranger if you have any issues or problems that they can help you with. And of course, they're there to make sure all the rules are observed and all that too. So you should.
I should have an adventure.
You should have an adventure. Everybody has an adventure that goes to the Allagash. Even when I go out there some days, oh man, it was quite an adventure for the young man that spent the night in the woods. I guess the mosquitoes were pretty bad, and he was pretty well stung up by morning. But
I can imagine. I remember what it was like 39 years ago.
Certain places the bugs are bad, but generally speaking, right now the bugs are not bad at all. I mean, most campsites you don't even notice they're around at all. But you go to certain spots, and actually the Tramway is one of the spots. That's always been a buggy place, and it still is today. So but bring your bug spray when you go to the Tramway, and then that's a pretty well visited spot on the waterway. That actual Tramway, we all call it Tramway, but it's a Tramway trains, and it's in the same location. Just because of 3,000 feet that separate the directions, the northward flow and southward flow.
Yeah. Now, when you get to the site, can you see where the trains are, or where you're supposed to go to see them?
Well, it's not marked, but it is. The coordinates are on our brochure if you have a GPS. But if you kind of just go into that Tramway Cove on Chamberlain Lake and you go way to the end, that's a spot. You'll see it because there's been enough use there that you can kind of tell it's trampled down a little bit. But there is no marker.
Right.
But if you have a map and you can actually read a map just a little bit, I don't think you'll have a problem finding them.
I both have a map and I can read it, but can I do both simultaneously? Not sure. Let's go find out.
Now, we have a couple things on our website that would be really helpful for people that want to go up there, and you might find it pretty interesting too. So if you go to maine.gov/Allagash, that's the shortcut, maine.gov/Allagash, we have a video series on there, 8-part video series. There's one section about history. There's one about preparing for an Allagash trip, the fisheries of the region, winter use. I mean, there's 8 different segments. And also on there's a Google Earth program that you can see every campsite. There's a short description about that campsite, whatever, if it's a one-party site or made for bigger groups, or there's a spring there for water, whatever the highlight is of that site, it says it. And they give you a little picture, so you can kind of plan your trip and say, I'd like to stay there. I mean, we don't reserve particular campsites. In other words, they're all first come, first served, but generally speaking, if you don't wait till too late in the day, you can get your pick of the campsites. And to be honest with you, back in the middle 80s, we had about 20% more visitors than we have today.
Yeah, and when I did it 39 years ago, we didn't have to share campsites or much of the lake at all.
Right.
It comes and goes.
It does, and we're in our busiest part of the summer right now. I mean, if you name a camp group, they're probably up there, or they've been there, or they're going. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of camp groups up there right now.
Yeah. Is there a time of the year that it's just too late to do it?
Well, we're open year round, 365 days, 24/7. But my preference is really in the fall when there's to get those nice warm days and cool nights, and there's no bugs. And the only unknown for a fall canoe trip really is the water levels, because generally speaking, we lower our levels down for fish management purposes in the fall, and then so we may not have we have a dam at Churchill and Telos, and that's how we manage the water there for more than recreation. It's for fisheries, and we lower the level down in the fall and keep it that way for the winter, and then bring it up in the summer. So we may not have the water to release to give you a good trip down the Allagash. Let's put it that way. But if it's really dry in September, we're going to not have a good water year. But if we get normal, get some rainfall during the fall, it usually stays up pretty good.
That is Matt LaRoche, Superintendent of the Allagash, with tips on how to visit Chamberlain Lake up here north of Baxter State Park. While on the lake, I visited many of the campsites, figuring out which ones are my favorites. Let's get a sample to close out today's show. Lock Dam. Okay, this is not exactly what I was expecting, but it's pretty cool. It's historic. It's basically a big earthen stone berm across the outlet, and then just one pipe on the right side covered by a grate that lets all the water out. There's a sign up there that says, "Warning, keep back, dangerous whirlpool." I think what's most impressive is there's a campsite here, and there's nobody on it. I mean, this is a beautiful day, a beautiful opportunity to come up on Chamberlain Lake. So far, I've seen Rob go down lake to go fishing from Duchesne's camps, and we passed one campsite where I saw a guy in a lawn chair. I have not seen a canoe. I have not seen other people. I haven't seen a moose or other animals. I had 3 loons, a bunch of ring-billed gulls, and otherwise, this fantastic, iconic lake is all mine. Back in the campsite, room for 2, 3, there's 3 tables here. So at least 3 campsites in this location, all of them extraordinary. Big stone fireplaces, great views, you're tucked back in the woods. Man, this would be a marvelous place to stay if you were fishing. So if I understand this correctly, the entire Allagash Wilderness Waterway runs through this 3-foot culvert. Boy, I didn't see that coming. Lost Spring Campsite. I'm at the north end of the lake, about 2 miles away from the trestle, about 2 miles away from where the tram and the trains are. But definitely the north end of the lake. You can look down the south end of the lake all the way down, miles away. Baxter State Park is way south of me. In the blue haze, I can see Double Top just fine. Cadillac is poking up just nicely. Lost Spring Campsite itself is a solo place. Room for 1 tent. Good put in here, right next to the tent site, and it's a little deeper and less rocky in this spot. So, good vantage point to come explore the north end of the lake here at Lost Spring. Not quite midway up the lake, on the west side where there's a big cove, around the back side of this cove, there's Gravel Beach. This would be a good family spot because the kids would love swimming in this spot. It's nice and shallow, a little bit of sandy area, good campsite. You get a north wind prevailing, it'll blow the bugs off in the spring, maybe. Well, probably not. Gravel Beach. Make a mental note of this. Day 2, Nugent's Camp, Chamberlain Lake, east side. So far this morning, it's about 8:30, and I've seen 1 boat go north on the lake. That's it. At Nugent's Camps, I would say there's only 3 cabins currently occupied. The campsites we viewed yesterday, 1 had somebody on it. So there's almost nobody on Chamberlain Lake at the end of summer. And it's absolutely spectacularly gorgeous. Sometimes I think Maine is wasted on Mainers. Truth is, you cannot get this anywhere in upper New Hampshire, in northern Vermont. You couldn't get this in upstate New York. You'd have to go well into Canada to get this kind of peace and tranquility. And there's a lot of peace and tranquility because nobody's using it. Well, I'm going to be using it. The lake is quiet, the campsites are great, and I'll definitely be going back to Nugent's Camps. In fact, we'll make another on-air visit later this year so you can meet these camps up close and personal. They're actually busier in winter because the ice fishing is famously good. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine returns next Saturday morning at 9, Sunday morning at 8, and online afterwards at 929theticket.com. Brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Napa Auto Parts, Bar Harbor Whale Watch, and EBS. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.